Hi everyone, this is Natalie from Dreamers Together, and we're bringing you today a video guide for the infamous Form I-864, the Affidavit of Support. It seems like this form gives a lot of people some trouble, and there's some confusion as to how to fill out this form, but I really just want to let everyone know it's not that difficult, it's not too complicated. But we're here to assist you, so we're going to be going over that today. Now, the Affidavit of Support, otherwise known as the Form I-864, is going to be a form that is going to be included in almost every single applicant's adjustment of status packet. There are some instances where you are not required to submit this form. You can submit an alternative waiver form, but we'll go over that in a different video. Now, we are going to go step by step with this form as well as some different scenarios and how that differs, how you're going to fill out this form. Now we're going to start here in part 1, which I've already filled out, where you're going to fill out the name of the sponsor. Now for most applicants, the sponsor is going to be your petitioner. There are instances where you're going to need a joint sponsor. And when that happens, you will actually end up submitting 2 Form I-864s. But your petitioner always has to fill one out either way, even if you are using a joint sponsor or several joint sponsors. All right, so in our scenario, the sponsor is Jose Eduardo Garcia, otherwise known as the petitioner. Remember that this form is filled out from the perspective of the sponsor and the petitioner. So always take that into account when filling out this form. So the first thing we're going to do is put in the sponsor's full name. So we put here Jose Eduardo Garcia, as he's the sponsor. And now we're going to choose option 1A, which states, I am the petitioner. I filed or am filing for the immigration of my relative. Again, this is the I-864 filled out by the petitioner, who is the main sponsor. So you're going to click on box 1A. That is the default and the most common option when filling out this form for your adjustment of status packet. Now, moving along, these are some other options. We're not going to choose them because right now, Jose is the petitioner and also the sponsor. Now, immediately, if you notice, on part 2, it's no longer going to be asking about the sponsor. It immediately jumps into asking about the principal immigrant. So this is going to be what we call the beneficiary of the adjustment of status application. All right, so in our scenario, our beneficiary is Fulanita Lopez Garcia. So we've gone ahead and filled out her name here, Fulanita Lopez Garcia. And then we're going to switch back up to the next section, which is asking for the beneficiary's address. And we've gone ahead and already filled that out as well. Just a very generic 123 Main Street. Make sure you fill out the street number, name. If you have an apartment, suite, floor, or unit number, make sure to fill that out as well. City, state, and zip. And this is going to pre-populate as USA. All right. Now it's going to continue asking for information about the beneficiary. The first question is going to be the beneficiary or the principal immigrant's country of citizenship or nationality. In our scenario, Fulanita is from Mexico. So we put Mexico there. You're going to go ahead and fill out the beneficiary or principal immigrant's date of birth, their A number if they have one, and their USCIS online account number if they have one. This is an important one, guys. If your beneficiary or if the applicant, the principal immigrant, has a USCIS online account number, make sure to fill it out on all forms. So we filled one out here, and then I've gone ahead and filled out just a made-up phone number there for Fulanita. And that is the end of page 1. So we're going to move along to page 2. All right, so on page 2, we are here on part 3, where it's asking about information about immigrants that you are sponsoring. Again, that the petitioner is sponsoring. So we're going to go ahead and say here, I am sponsoring the principal immigrant named in part 2. Remember, who we named in part 2 was the beneficiary, Fulanita. So we're going to go ahead and click yes, because Jose is sponsoring Fulanita. So we put yes here. Now, the other 2 options are usually not going to apply for anyone that is doing adjustment of status through a U.S. citizen petitioner that is their spouse or their child over 21. This is for sponsoring additional family members, follow to join family members, derivative family members, and most adjustment of status applications are not going to have those. So after you click yes on question 1, most individuals will be able to just leave the rest of this page blank. So we're going to move on to page 3. Right. And here we have page 3. Page 3, part 3 actually continues here, and question 29 asks, enter the total number of immigrants that you're sponsoring on this affidavit. That's important, this affidavit. So if you've sponsored someone in the past, don't worry, you're not going to count them here. So in this scenario, Jose is sponsoring his wife, Fulanita. So he's just sponsoring one person, Fulanita. So we're going to go ahead and put a 1 here. And now, if you notice on part 4, it actually switches over to information about you, about the sponsor. So now we're going to go ahead and fill out Jose's information. So we filled out Jose Eduardo Garcia in the order that they provided. Garcia, family name, Jose is a given name, Eduardo is his middle name. Make sure that this matches what you input on that first question on page 1, okay? If it doesn't match, make sure you will make any adjustments necessary. All right, and then moving along, we have the mailing address. In our scenario, Jose is sponsoring his wife and they live together, so that's the same address there. Pay attention here to question 3. Is your current mailing address the same as your physical address? For most of us, that's going to be a yes. And once you click yes, then you'll be able to go ahead and ignore this section over here where it's asking for the sponsor's physical address. Now, if you clicked no, because you do have separate mailing and residence address, just make sure you go ahead and fill out this section for the residence address. All right, now we're going into the section for other information. And again, we're still in information about the sponsor. So we're still going to continue to answer these from the about the sponsor. So the country of domicile, that means where is the sponsor living? In our scenario, and in most scenarios, the sponsor actually has to be domiciled in the USA. So we've gone ahead and put USA, fill out the sponsor's date of birth, city, state, and country of birth. So in our scenario, Jose was born in the US, so we filled out Richmond, Virginia, USA. You're going to fill out the sponsor's social security number, and then you're going to fill out what is the sponsor status. In our scenarios, this is an adjustment of status where Jose is a U.S. citizen sponsoring Fulanita, his wife. So we're going to click I am a U.S. citizen. Now, Jose was born in the USA in our scenario, so he doesn't have an A number. He's never been assigned one, so we can leave that blank. Do make sure to fill out your sponsor's online account number if they have one. Now, if the sponsor or the petitioner filled out form I-130 online, then they would have a USCIS online account number. Be sure to fill that out here. And then the last question for page 13 just asks about military service. If the petitioner is active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces or Coast Guard, make sure to put yes. If the petitioner is not a part of the U.S. Armed Forces or Coast Guard, active duty, make sure to put no. Now, one thing that's important to notice here, it says to be completed by petitioner sponsors only. That's important to note if you're filling this out for a joint sponsor. The joint sponsor is not going to fill this out, only if they are the petitioning sponsor. So if they're the petitioner for the I-130 as well as the sponsor for the I-864. All right, and that takes care of page 3. We're going to go ahead and move along to page 4. This is the troublemaker. This is the one that gives everyone a lot of headache. So the first thing that we're going to talk about are these infamous boxes. Now, these boxes are used to count the household size so that they can determine what the appropriate income is supposed to be. Now, if you notice, on my form, question 1 is already filled out. If when you're filling this out, question 1 is, box 1 is still blank, that means you've made an error. This one over here is actually pre-populated from when we filled out a one. I'm going to bring us back all the way up here on part 3, item 29. See how we filled out that we're sponsoring one immigrant? That's pre-populates the one down in the next section. If your form for some reason did not pre-populate, it's most likely because you're not using Adobe to open and fill out your I-864. One thing that is important to note, and I guess I should have mentioned it in the beginning of the video, but that's okay. We recommend that you download the PDFs of the forms from the USCIS website, and then you save them onto your computer and open them with Adobe and fill them out with Adobe Acrobat. This is what's going to make sure that these boxes actually work the way that they're supposed to work. All right, so moving along, we have our one here, and this one is representing the immigrant, the principal immigrant. This one in the next section represents yourself. Now, this is a tricky one. It says 3. If you're currently married, enter 1 for your spouse. Most people will say, well, he's married to fulanita, so we're going to enter a 1 here. That would be incorrect. It's very important in these boxes to never count anyone twice. So even though Jose is in fact married and should put a 1 here for his spouse, because fulanita is the principal immigrant that he's sponsoring, she's already accounted for here. So we're going to go ahead and leave this box blank. All right. Now for question 4, I was going to ask about dependent children. Let's say in our scenario, Jose and fulanita have 2 children together. So we're going to put a 2 here. And if you notice, when I put that 2 here, this box down here for household size automatically recalculated to 4. That's how you know that your boxes are working. So moving along, it's going to ask for 5 if you have any other dependents. This is where you would put any dependents that are listed on the most recent tax return. So you're going to look at the principal, sorry, not the principal, you're going to look at the petitioner's most recent tax return and see if there are any dependents that have not been taken into account. So for example, let's say Jose had a younger brother, and his younger brother was living with him and he was providing for his younger brother. In that scenario, we were going to go ahead and put a 1 here for Jose's younger brother because his younger brother is not his child, but he is a dependent on his taxes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stick with that. Jose, his household is fulanita up here, himself, their 2 children, and Jose's younger brother that lives with him that Jose takes care of and provides for financially and has listed on his most recent tax return. Now I'm going to go ahead and mention what these other 2 boxes are, but in our scenario, we're not going to fill them out. This number 6 is where you would input anybody that you've previously filled out and adjust in an affidavit of support form for, which is the form I-864. Now pay attention to where it says who are now lawful permanent residents. What does that mean? Let's say Jose was also currently sponsoring his mother for a green card. So he currently has a pending application for his mother's adjustment of status. That means he also filled out a form I-864 for his mother. But her case is still pending. She's not a lawful permanent resident yet. So we would not have to count her in this box. We would just leave it blank. Now, if Jose's mother had already been approved and gotten her lawful permanent resident status, then we would in fact have to count her there. All right. Now the last option here, 7, this says optional. If you have any siblings, parents, or adult children that live within the same principal residence who is combining their income with yours. It's not going to be very often that you're going to fill this box out, but this is specifically when you do not have sufficient income, when the petitioner doesn't have sufficient income, and they're hoping to combine their income with someone else in their household. Someone that's not necessarily a dependent on their taxes, so they wouldn't be counted up above, but that they know they need to combine income with in order to meet the minimum requirements. You do not put a number here if you are the petitioner combining income with the actual immigrant that you're sponsoring, okay? So just make sure you don't do that. All right, so like we said, this kept calculating and it's now calculated to 5 since we added Jose's brother. Now, further down here, part 6, it's going to ask about the sponsor's employment and income. Again, the petitioner's employment and income in our scenario. All right, so I have indicated here that Jose is employed. So we've checked off this box and we put down his occupation. Let's say he's a pilot with Delta Airlines. So that's what we filled out here. If Jose was also employed with another company, or if he had a part-time job or second job, you would just list that employer here as well. All right. Now in our scenario, Jose's employed, so that is all we would fill out for him in this section. But I do just want to mention, if the petitioner is self-employed, they have their own business, they're paid as a 1099 contractor, they fill out any type of self-employed taxes, a Schedule K1 or Schedule C, then you're going to click on this box and you're going to list the occupation. All right, now moving to the next section, there's the option for retired, and then there's the option for unemployed. We'll touch base on those scenarios in a future video, but just know that if you are currently retired and the income is retirement income, you would click box 5, and you'd have to indicate since when you've been retired. So when did you officially become a retiree? Now, if you're unemployed, same scenario. You would click the unemployed box, and you'd have to provide the date during which you became unemployed. All right, so in our scenario, Jose is employed, remember, with Delta Airlines. So for 7, we're going to put current individual annual income. I've already filled this out, but I want to mention, what does current individual annual income mean? So let's break this down. Current. Current means this year. It's a common misconception. It's a common misconception where people think that current individual annual income means, oh, input whatever you have for income from your 2022 taxes or your most recent tax year. That is not correct. When you do taxes, you're technically doing taxes for the year prior. So current means this current year that we're in. This video is being done in 2023, which means this is asking for the income for 2023. Annual income, yearly. So they want to know, what is Jose's annual yearly income going to be by the end of this current year of 2023? Well, Jose's a pilot. He has a salary of $118,000 a year. Again, individual income, input your income before they take away taxes. This is going to be not your net, it's going to be your gross income. So before any taxes or deductions are taken out of your paycheck, that's where you're going to input here. So in our scenario, Jose is earning $118,000 as a pilot. That is his salary. Now, for Jose, he is earning well enough to sponsor a family of 5. So we're not going to overcomplicate things. We're not going to add in assets. We're not going to add in the income of any other person. This is the next section here. Income you're using from any other person who is counted in your household size. In our scenario, we're not doing that. But if you find yourself in a situation where the petitioner does not make enough income and you are needing to combine the income with someone else in the household, including the immigrant that the petitioner is petitioning for, if that immigrant has a valid employment authorization document, their income can be combined with the petitioner. So we can do that here, okay? See, it says, including in certain conditions, the intending immigrant. For spouse, you can include your intending immigrant spouse's income if they have an employment authorization document that is valid. For other petition types, let's say you're a child and you're petitioning for your parent, you can also include your parent's income if they have a valid employment authorization document and if they reside with you. That's the second requirement for for children. They have to reside, for parents, they have to reside with you. All right, so then moving along here in our scenario, we're leaving this blank because we don't need to combine our income with anyone else. Oh, wow. So see here, part 6, On item 20, you see how this is already filled out with us. This is another indication that these forms need to be opened with Adobe. If this is blank for you, then you need to close it down and reopen it with Adobe. This pre-populates from when we input in the previous page. All right. So in our scenario, Jose did not need to combine his income with any other individuals, which means we leave questions 21 and 22 blank. But I just want to touch base on these really quick. If Jose had needed to combine his income with someone else in the household that was not the intending immigrant, then you would check off item 21. And that person who is combining their income or offering to combine their income would have to fill out a form I-864A. Again, if the person who is combining income with the petitioner resides in the house as part of the household, they would fill out form I-864A. Now, if the person who's combining income with Jose was his spouse, who is also the beneficiary or the intending immigrant, in that scenario, you would check off question 22 and you would input here the beneficiary's name. Note that it says here, do not need to complete form Do not need to complete form I-864A because he or she is the intending immigrant and has no accompanying dependents. All right, so again, just note that if our scenario was different and Fulanita, the beneficiary, needed to combine her income with her petitioner Jose, we would check off 22. We would input Fulanita's name here and she would not need to fill out form I-864A. All right, again, our scenario, Jose makes more than enough, so we're leaving all that blank and we're moving down here. Federal income tax return information. Have you filed federal income tax returns for each of the 3 most recent years? So you're going to want to make sure that you fill out yes or no. I'm going to tell you right away. You had to have filed federal income tax return for the last 3 years unless you were not required to file a federal income tax because you did not earn enough income to be required to file income tax returns. But for most individuals, we're going to mark the box yes. Now, if you did earn enough money to file your income tax returns and you simply haven't filed the last 3 years, know that as a petitioner, you must have the last 3 years filed if you are required to file. If you do not have them, you're going to get a request for evidence from USCIS, an RFE. And if you are not able to respond to that RFE in time, they will go ahead and move forward with denying the adjustment of status application. So again, just to reiterate, if the petitioner was required to file income taxes because they did earn enough income during the year and they simply haven't, don't move forward. Get that tax situation figured out first. Make sure that those taxes are filed. Again, keyword is filed. It doesn't necessarily have to be paid, processed, just filed. So get those filings done first and then go ahead and move forward. All right, as you can see here, there is a special note that says you must attach a photocopy or transcript of your federal income tax return for only the most recent tax year. So you're only required to send in your most recent tax year. But if you see 23B, there is an option to go ahead and attach transcripts for the last 3 years, so the second and third year as well. We normally recommend that if you have access to your last 3 tax return transcripts or tax returns, you go ahead and just send all 3, especially if they show consistent income. That's going to help your 864 get approved a little easier. So in our scenario, Jose is an airline pilot. He's been a pilot for several years. His income has consistently been around the same amount, so we're going to go ahead and mark that box there. All right, now this is the section that I have noticed most people have a small error. And this is what causes you to get those RFEs for the I-864. And unfortunately, the RFEs that USCIS sends, they're not very helpful at all. It would be great if they told you, hey, pay attention to this particular section of the form. That's where you have an error. But they don't do that. They sent everyone the same kind of template, just saying that they couldn't determine that the petitioner meets the requirements. And then they send you kind of saying to send in a new 864 and new evidence, and to not forget to put in the social, etc. All this mumbo jumbo. Just know that they sent everyone pretty much the same RFB for the 864. Okay, but again, let's place some special attention to this section here. This is where I see the most errors. So we're going to go ahead and put in the most recent 3 years. We're in 2023, which means the last 3 tax years were 2022, 2021, and 2020. So I've input those 3 there. Now you have to input the total income from each tax year. This is where the mistake happens. For some reason, people think total income means adjusted gross income. And I think it comes from this section here where it says that the adjusted gross income on the IRS form 1040 easy is the same as the total income. But here's the thing, the 1040 easy doesn't exist anymore, so nobody should be looking at the adjusted gross income when filling this out. What you're going to do instead is you're going to look for the line on your tax return, or even better, on your return transcript that says total income, the way that it says here. Total income. Now I'm going to show you really quick where it is that we can see that. I have here a blank 2020 1040 form, 2022, sorry, 1040 form. Now, if this is what you're looking at in order to find your total income, what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down to line, if you look here, all these lines have numbers. You're going to scroll down to line 9 right here. So if I highlight line 9 for you, you'll see that line 9 says, this is your total income. So whatever number appears in this box 9 is what you're going to input on your 864. Don't worry if that number seems like it's off, especially if you file joint taxes with your spouse and you're looking at that number and you're saying that is not the amount of income that I earn. Do not worry. They're not asking you to do math and split up your income. They really just need you to match what's on your tax records. So again, pull up your 1040 form, look at the line 9 that says total income. Always double check that it says total income over here, and then just grab that number and immediately input it into your 864. Match it exactly to the dollar. Now, if you're not sending in your 1040s and you have instead your tax return transcript, which looks like this, IRS, product contains sensitive information, and it says tax return transcript. If this is what you have, it's going to look a little different where you have to look, and I'll show you now. So for this one, you're going to scroll down. It's usually on the second page. Let me zoom out here a little bit. Right, so it's normally on this second page of your tax return. If you look for where it says adjustments to income, just because it stands out because of the white space, look right above that. Total income per computer, and then right above there we have our magic line, total income. So if you follow the line all the way over, there you have your total income, and that's where you're going to go ahead and input in the form I-864. So again, guys, remember, keyword is total income. You're going to look for that word both on your 1040 or your tax return transcript where I've showed you here today. So you're going to input that number exactly. So in our scenario, it's 119,920 that shows up. So we'll put in here 119,920. And let's say I looked up the other 2 years. I looked up a year for 2021 and it was about the same thing. Let's say it was 118,550. And then let's say that 2020, he was earning a little bit less, and we'll put 116,250. All right. So we filled out these 3 total income boxes for the last 3 years. And then that's pretty much it for someone whose income is enough to meet the requirements. The next part is about assets, adding assets to your income. You don't need to overcomplicate the 864. Even if you have plenty of assets, Don't add them on if your income on its own is enough to meet the requirements, the minimum income requirements. So in our scenario, 118 is more than enough. So we're going to skip this whole section about assets. And then we get here to the end, which is part 8, which is the sponsor's contract. Make sure you read that. You understand what being a sponsor means, how long it lasts, what the consequences are, what your responsibilities are. But for purposes of filling this out, you're going to go on to page 7 and right here, sponsor statement. You're going to want to make sure you mark box 1A if you're preparing your own form. So 1A says that you can read and understand English and you've read and understood every question and instruction on the affidavit and your answer to every question. And then you're going to go ahead and fill out your phone number, cell phone number, email address. And last but not least, you're going to go ahead and sign it here on 6A and date it on 6B. So I hope that this was helpful. This was just a very straightforward guide as to how to fill out the I-864 based on just a normal scenario of a petitioner who does earn enough income to sponsor the immigrant. Now, I know you've heard me mention a few times in this video, as long as the petitioner earns the minimum required income for his household size or their household size. And maybe you're wondering, well, what is the minimum required income? That is something that is determined by the federal poverty level. USCIS states that petitioners or sponsors must meet 125% of the federal poverty level for their household size. If you're in the military, active duty military, and if the petitioner is an active duty military member, then they're only required to meet 100% of the federal poverty level. But bear with me here 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and show you where it is that you can look at those numbers. All right, so in order to figure out what is the required income for the affidavit of support or form for I-864, we're going to go to the best resource, which is USCIS. So go ahead and go on over to the USCIS website. And what you're going to do is here on the search bar, you're going to put in 864P and then go ahead and search. And the very first thing that shows up here is 864P 2023 HHS Poverty Guidelines for Affidavit of Support. If you notice right underneath it, there's actually the same item, but in Spanish. So for my Spanish speakers, or for someone that needs to provide it to someone in Spanish, you can click on the second link. All right, so we're going to go ahead and click on this first link. And this is the Affidavit of Support Poverty Guidelines. So it depends on the state that you're in. If you're in Alaska or Hawaii, you have your own guidelines. But for the rest of the United States, you're going to click here on this first section. And you're going to go down and it has the amount for each household size. So you're going to look on the left for your household size. In our scenario, Jose, our sponsor, is a household of 5, has a household of 5. Himself, his intending immigrant, Fulanita, which is his spouse, his 2 children, and his dependent brother. So his household is 5. So we're going to look over at 5, and he must show that he earns at least $43,925 annually in order to meet the poverty guidelines or the required minimum amount for the affidavit of support. As we know, Jose in our scenario is a pilot. He earns well over this amount, so he is more than fine to prove to USCIS that he does earn enough income. So that takes us back to our Form I-864 that we've just finished filling out for Jose. As we just realized, he does make way more than enough income in order to meet the requirements. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, what do I need to submit for Form I-864? What you need to submit for the Form 864 is you need to submit proof that the sponsor is either a U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or a U.S. national. So for Jose, he's born in the U.S., we can submit his birth certificate or his U.S. passport. Now, you're also going to submit your tax returns, or honestly, it's preferable if you can go online, download those tax return transcripts, and send those in. USCIS tends to have an easier time reading those. They're a little more concise, less pages to submit, so you can go ahead and submit those. And then last but not least, you're going to want to prove your income. So for example, with Jose, he gets paid salary, so he can just go online. I don't know, let's say he has his pay stubs in ADP. He goes on ADP.com, downloads the last, let's say, 3 months of his pay stubs, and he submits those as well. That is more than enough to show to USCIS that he earns enough income to sponsor his wife, Fulanita. They'll look at his tax transcripts, which he's required to send at least 1 year, but we recommend 3 if you can. They're going to look at his passport or birth certificate, see that he does in fact qualify to be a sponsor, and then they're going to look at his pay stubs and make the determination that he does earn enough as well. So that takes care of the Form I-864. As you can see, it's not as complicated as we think it is. It's really just about knowing those little nuances and what they are asking you for. That's the key word, current annual income, total income, those little details is what's going to make the difference between your 864 going smoothly and you getting an RFE. But remember, getting an RFE is not the end of the world, just gives you an opportunity to look at that form that you filled out again and make sure that you have all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed and that you've sent all the satisfactory evidence. That is going to be it for today's video. We're going to try our best to create a follow-up video where we're going to look at other scenarios for 864, such as joint sponsors or combining income. And let us know if there's any other forms that you might want a video guide for. We're going to start trying to work on video guides for you. Hopefully this was helpful. Let us know. You can leave us some comments. Let us know if this was helpful. Let us know if there's anything that you may want us to make a video guide for in the future. And I hope that everything goes smoothly and efficiently for all of my community members that are applying for adjustment of status. As you know, make sure to follow us on our Facebook group pages. We're also on Instagram, we're on Reddit, we're on Twitter, and on TikTok. We're always here to support you. We're here to every step of the way. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to help. Again, you can look for us on all social media platforms under Dreamers Together. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Take care.